The story of Job is one of the most powerful and emotional journeys in the Bible, a man whose faith was tested like no other by Satan. But Job never looks back, but he rather stands firm and have faith in God. This is the full story of Job in the Bible. Chapter 1. The righteous man of Uz. In the land of Uz, far from the bustling cities and noise of kingdoms, lived a man named Job. Job was unlike any other of his generation. He was wealthy, respected, and blessed beyond measure. But more importantly, he was blameless and upright in the eyes of God. Job feared the Lord deeply and turned away from evil. His life was marked not by selfish ambition, but by reverence for God and compassion for others. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and his household was full of joy and laughter. His livestock numbered in the thousands: sheep, camels, oxen, and donkeys, and he had countless servants. Truly, Job was called the greatest man among all the people of the East. Every day, Job's children would gather in one another's homes, feasting and celebrating life together. And after each celebration, Job would rise early in the morning, offering burnt sacrifices for each of his children. Perhaps one of them has sinned in their hearts or cursed God, he would think. Job's devotion was constant. Even in prosperity, he remained humble, acknowledging that all he had came from the Lord. But unseen to Job, events were unfolding in the heavenly realms that would test everything he believed. Chapter 2. A heavenly conversation. Far beyond the earth, in the unseen spiritual realm, the heavenly court gathered before God's throne. Angels, God's messengers and warriors, stood in attendance, awaiting his commands. But among them was one whose heart was twisted with envy and malice: Satan, the accuser. The Lord asked him, "Where have you come from?" Satan replied with a sly grin, "From roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it." God looked into the accuser's eyes and spoke with authority. "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him, blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." At this, Satan's grin grew wider. He had been waiting for this moment. "Does Job fear God for nothing?" he sneered. "Haven't you placed a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You bless the work of his hands so that his flocks and herds spread across the land. But now stretch out your hand and strike all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." A hush fell over the court. The accusation was bold, a direct challenge to Job's faith and to God's honor. But God, who knew Job's heart, replied calmly, "Very well then, everything he has is in your power, but on the man himself do not lay a finger." And with that, Satan departed with wicked determination, setting his schemes in motion. Back on earth, Job continued his life of devotion, unaware that a storm unlike any other was about to sweep through his world. Reflection for the chapter. Here we see that spiritual battles often happen unseen. Job didn't know about the heavenly conversation, but his life was about to become a proving ground for faith. Satan's goal: destroy faith. God's goal: prove that true faith endures even in suffering. Chapter 3. Calamity Strikes. The sun rose over Uz as it had on countless other mornings. Birds sang, servants tended to Job's great herds, and his children prepared another joyful feast in the home of their eldest brother. But in the unseen realm, Satan's dark schemes were already unfolding. A messenger arrives. Job was seated in quiet reflection when a servant burst through the door, sweat pouring down his face. "Master, the Sabaeans attacked. They raided the oxen and donkeys and killed all the servants with the sword. I alone escaped to tell you." Before Job could respond, another servant ran in, his eyes wild with fear. "Fire from God fell from the heavens and burned up the sheep and the servants, and I alone have escaped to tell you." Job's hands trembled, but he barely had time to speak before yet another servant arrived, his voice hoarse from shouting. The Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties. They swept down on the camels and made off with them. They killed all your servants with the sword. I alone escaped to tell you. The final blow. As Job's heart reeled from the flood of tragedy, a 4th servant stumbled in, collapsing to his knees. Your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. Suddenly, a mighty wind swept in from the desert. It struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are all dead. I alone escaped to tell you. Job's response. The world fell silent. Job's wealth was gone. His children, his greatest treasure, were gone. He tore his robe in anguish and shaved his head as a sign of mourning. Then, falling to the ground, he did not curse God as Satan predicted. Instead, he worshipped. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. Job 1:21. In all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. Reflection for the chapter. Job's response was not denial of his pain. It was faith in the midst of the storm. Satan's plan was to break him, but Job's first instinct was still to bow before God. True faith is revealed not in times of blessing, but in times of loss. Chapter 4. The friends arrive. The ashes still clung to Job's torn robe. Days had passed since the whirlwind of tragedy struck. Yet his grief felt as raw as the moment he had first heard the servant's words. His home, once filled with laughter and life, had become a silent place of mourning. His body, too, bore the marks of suffering. Satan, dissatisfied that Job had not cursed God after losing everything, had afflicted him with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. Job sat on the ground, scraping his skin with a piece of broken pottery, trying in vain to find relief. His wife, overwhelmed by despair, spoke harshly. "Are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die." But Job answered softly, though with deep sorrow, "You are speaking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. The arrival of friends. Far away, 3 of Job's friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, heard of his calamities. They came with good intentions, to offer comfort and to mourn with him. As they approached, they scarcely recognized him. The man they once knew, wealthy, healthy, and joyful, was now sitting in ashes, emaciated, his skin covered in sores, his face lined with grief. They raised their voices and wept aloud. "This cannot be Job," they said to one another. In solidarity with his pain, they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their own heads. 7 days of silence. The 3 men sat on the ground with Job for 7 days and 7 nights, and no one said a word. Why? Because his suffering was so great that words felt inadequate. There was a sacredness to the silence, a shared acknowledgement of Job's unimaginable loss. Yet beneath their quiet mourning, thoughts stirred in their minds. They began to wonder, could such suffering come without cause? Reflection for the chapter. Job's friends began well mourning alongside him in silence. But soon their assumptions about God's justice and Job's suffering would turn comfort into conflict. Sometimes presence is more powerful than words. But when we speak without understanding, even good intentions can wound deeply. Chapter 5. Job's lament and search for answers. The silence of 7 days and nights finally broke, not with comfort, but with a cry of anguish from Job's lips. Sitting in ashes, scraping his diseased skin, he lifted his voice. Not in anger, but in grief so deep it seemed bottomless. Job speaks, "May the day of my birth perish, and the night that said, A boy is conceived. Why did I not perish at birth, or die as I came from the womb? Job 3:11. The words poured out like water from a shattered vessel. Job didn't curse God, but he cursed the day of his own existence. Why is life given to those in misery, to those who long for death that does not come? His voice cracked with sobs. He couldn't understand why a man who had walked uprightly with God, sacrificing daily and shunning evil, had been crushed so completely. Questions without answers. Job didn't claim perfection, but in his heart he knew he had not turned from God. Yet why had disaster fallen so swiftly? Why had his children been taken? Why was his body racked with pain? For sighing has become my daily food. My groans pour out like water. What I feared has come upon me. What I dreaded has happened to me. Job 3:24-25. The friends respond. Job's lament stirred his three friends. They had sat quietly for a week, but now they could hold their tongues no longer. Eliphaz spoke first, gently but with assumption. Consider this. Who, being innocent, has ever perished? Those who plow evil and those who sow trouble reap it. In his mind, suffering must mean sin. Job's calamity, he believed, was surely God's judgment. Bildad followed bluntly. If your children have sinned against him, he gave them over to the penalty of their sin. But if you are pure and upright, surely God will restore you. Zophar added sternly, know this, God has even forgotten some of your sin. If you rid yourself of evil, you will stand firm. Job's heart breaks further. The words cut deeper than his sores. Job cried out, you are miserable comforters, all of you. Will your long-winded speeches never end? If you were in my place, I could talk as you do, but my mouth would encourage you. Comfort from my lips would bring you relief. Job longed not for accusations, but for answers. Not for judgment, but for understanding. Reflection for the chapter. When people are hurting, truth without compassion can do more harm than good. Job's friends sought to explain suffering instead of comforting the sufferer. Sometimes the best response to pain is not explanation, but presence. Chapter 6. God's majestic response. For days, Job and his friends argued. Job cried out for answers. His friends insisted he must have sinned. Yet the heavens stayed silent. Until suddenly, the silence was shattered. The voice from the storm. A whirlwind rose in the distance, swirling dust and shaking the earth. The sky darkened as clouds gathered, and thunder rumbled like the roar of 1,000 chariots. And then, from the heart of the storm, a voice spoke. Who is this that obscures my plans with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Job 38:2-3. Job trembled, covering his face. This was not the answer he expected. God did not offer an explanation for Job's suffering. Instead, he asked questions. Questions that revealed his power and Job's smallness. God's questions. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Lightning flashed as God's voice thundered. Have you ever given orders to the morning or shown the dawn its place? Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? Can you loosen Orion's belt? God spoke of the seas, the stars, the animals, creatures mighty and small, all formed and sustained by his hand. Job's humble reply. Job's heart melted within him. The questions were not meant to humiliate, but to remind him. God is sovereign. His wisdom far surpasses human understanding. I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer. Twice, but I will say no more. Job 44:5. But the Lord was not finished. Behemoth and Leviathan. God described the might of Behemoth and the terror of Leviathan, creatures Job could never hope to control. Nothing on earth is its equal. A creature without fear. It looks down on all that are haughty. It is king over all that are proud. Job 41:33-34. If Job could not master these creatures, how could he hope to grasp the full counsel of God? Reflection for the chapter. God didn't answer Job's why. Instead, he revealed who he is, the creator, sustainer, and Lord of all. Sometimes God doesn't explain our suffering because his ways are higher than ours. But he always reveals himself, and that is enough. Chapter 7. Restoration and double blessing. The storm had passed. The whirlwind was gone. But Job remained on his knees, overwhelmed by the majesty of God's presence. His voice trembled as he spoke. I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. Job 42:2-6. In his suffering, Job had cried out for answers. But in the end, it was not answers that brought him peace. It was an encounter with the living God, forgiveness and intercession. God's anger burned against Job's 3 friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, because they had not spoken truthfully about him. I am angry with you, the Lord said, because you have not spoken the truth about me, as my servant Job has. So now take 7 bulls and 7 rams, and go to my servant Job and sacrifice a burnt offering for yourselves. My servant Job will pray for you, and I will accept his prayer and not deal with you according to your folly. Job 42:7-8. The friends obeyed, and Job, despite all he had endured, prayed for them. At that moment, something shifted. The God who allowed the test now brought restoration. Job's restoration. The Lord restored Job's fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had before. Job 42:10. His brothers, sisters, and former acquaintances came to comfort him. Each brought him a gift of silver and gold. God blessed Job's later life even more than his former life. 14,000 sheep, double his original number. 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, 1,000 donkeys. He also had 7 more sons and 3 beautiful daughters. His daughters were so remarkable that the Bible says, nowhere in all the land were there found women as beautiful as Job's daughters, and their father granted them an inheritance along with their brothers. Job 42:15. The end of Job's journey. Job lived 140 more years. He saw his children and their children to the 4th generation. And so Job died, an old man and full of years. Job 42:17. Though his story began in blessing and descended into unimaginable suffering, it ended in even greater blessing, because Job's faith endured. Reflection for the chapter. The story of Job reminds us that suffering is not the end. God is able to restore, redeem, and bless far beyond what we have lost. When you hold on to faith in the storm, you open the door for double blessing after the trial.